She received an inheritance that completely changed the last few years of her life. With a real fortune in her hands, Ms. Bernardine was able to fulfill old dreams she never believed she could. But among those dreams, there was one that perhaps not even all the money in the world could buy. Her dream was to find her sister, whom she hadn't seen for over 60 years. But now that she had the power to investigate her whereabouts, it was unfortunately too late. Ms. Bernardine devoted herself to the daily chores of her humble home, where time seemed to pass slowly. But fate was about to knock on her door in an abrupt and surprising way. And just like that, a loud knock on the door echoed through the air. Ms. Bernardine, with her curious and wrinkled eyes, rose from her chair. As she opened the door, she was confronted by the imposing presence of a bailiff and a lawyer, dressed in clothes that were an easy contrast to the simplicity of her home. The bailiff, with a serious countenance, and the lawyer, with attentive eyes, greeted Ms. Bernardine with a respectful, "Good afternoon." The lady, now overcome by a silent anxiety, looked at the strangers for answers. The bailiff gave her an envelope that would take over the old walls of that house, transforming the peaceful course of Ms. Bernardine's life into an unpredictable and exciting journey. And lawyer delivered the news to his new client.
Ms. Bernardine, it is with great responsibility that we come to inform you that the late Mr. Roger, former owner of these lands and others, left all his assets, farms, jewels, and fortune to you in his will. You are his sole heir, as you dedicated your whole life to these lands, which are now yours by right.
Ms. Bernardine just stood there, listening attentively, her wrinkled hands clenching her apron. The news seemed to float through the air, surreal and unbelievable. The simple lady, used to the daily struggle, could barely process the greatness of the announcement. A pause filled the space as the lawyer's words hung in the air. Ms. Bernardine's thoughts began to swirl like leaves in the wind. She blinked repeatedly, as if trying to wake up from a dream. The lawyer went on to detail how Mr. Roger had made a point of leaving his inheritance to her before he passed away. He explained how the generous gentleman, with no direct heirs, expressed in his will his desire to repay Ms. Bernardine, who always took care of his land with such dedication, allowing her to continue living in her modest house. When she received the news, Ms. Bernardine was initially speechless, her trembling hands clutching her apron tighter, saying she didn't understand why, her simple voice carrying a tone of suspicion. Ms. Bernardine, used to life's adversities, couldn't help but feel a hint of fear. The news seemed too good to be true, and the humble lady began to wonder if she was falling for some kind of scam, her eyes searching for answers in the serious faces of the bailiff and the lawyer. The lawyer and the bailiff then presented documents, stamps, and papers attesting to the authenticity of the inheritance. Ms. Bernardine, despite not fully understanding everything that was written, was able to grasp the essentials. As the explanation went on, Ms. Bernardine, far from being just a humble old lady, revealed herself to be an astute and perceptive woman. Her quick thinking and ability to absorb information, even legal information, were evident. She began to mentally draw up plans to manage her new wealth, demonstrating a sagacity that no one at first glance would have imagined existed behind her apparent simplicity. Determined to share the news with those who were most precious in her life, Ms. Bernardine said she wanted to gather her children together to share the unusual turn in her life. Ms. Bernardine married when she was very young and soon became pregnant with her first child. Over the next 4 years, she gave birth to 3 more children and soon afterwards became a widow. Her husband died in an accident at work. At the age of 23, she was forced to work to support her 4 young children. Over the years, she went through many difficulties. The ramshackle house she called home, a modest shelter, saw the strength of a single mother fighting against the merciless winds of life.
We faced difficult times, threats of losing our home, but Mr. Roger, generous as he was, allowed us to continue here, a blessing I've never forgotten.
Ms. Bernardine said, her eyes revisiting memories of uncertainty and the compassion of the man who was now making her his heir. Often, the money she had was barely enough to feed all her children, and the small farm on the outskirts of the house was what provided food for the children for years. Ms. Bernardine never went to school, but she knew how to read. She loved books and read whenever she could in her youth.
My dreams had to be put aside, but life went on. And now an unexpected new chapter is starting.
She said, her voice laden with gratitude. Ms. Bernardine's story was like a book with pages yellowed by time, but now, with the news of her millionaire inheritance, she was faced with an opportunity to rewrite the last few chapters of her life. The challenges she had faced became the foundations of a new dream, and the humble old lady who had never imagined having more than the earth beneath her feet was beginning to glimpse a horizon of possibilities previously considered unattainable. When she realized the fortune that awaited her, Ms. Bernardine felt a wave of emotion and surprise run through her body. The value in his eyes was more than a sum of money. It was the promise of a new life, full of previously unimaginable possibilities. With excitement vibrating in her heart, Ms. Bernardine began a complete transformation. The old house, which had witnessed her resilience for years, was replaced by a majestic mansion. Every corner of the new residence exuded prosperity, but Ms. Bernardine's heart remained humble, filled with gratitude. The first stop on her journey of change was her health. Ms. Bernardine, now with resources at her disposal, invested in care that had previously been distant luxuries. Her remaining teeth, softened and marked by time, shone with a renewed smile. Regular doctor's appointments became common, ensuring that she could fully enjoy the second chance that life was offering her. However, Ms. Bernardine's transformation was not limited to the physical part. Her thirst for new experiences led her to learn to drive, breaking down barriers that time and lack of opportunities had tried to impose. The woman who never imagined getting behind the wheel of a car was now driving through roads, her smile reflecting the freedom she had achieved. But Ms. Bernardine was not content to live only for herself. With a generosity that had always been her trademark, she dedicated part of her fortune to providing a better life for her 4 children. New and comfortable house for each of them. The old lady, who had faced so many battles to keep a roof over their heads, now presented her children with homes that reflected the grandeur of their new reality. Her grandchildren, in turn, saw the doors to education open before them. Ms. Bernardine made a point of paying for her grandchildren's school expenses, giving their young minds the opportunity to dream and learn, something that Ms. Bernardine herself didn't have the chance to experience. But Ms. Bernardine still had a much bigger dream that she didn't know if she would be able to fulfill even with all the money she now had. Her heart, despite overflowing with recent achievements, carried the weight of an absence that had lasted for decades. His sister Lucy, separated by circumstances that life had imposed. The desire to reconnect with the ties that time and choices had torn apart became a burning flame. With renewed determination, Ms. Bernardine called in her trusted lawyer and, discreetly, a detective specializing in locating loved ones. Ms. Bernardine's heart grew tighter and tighter with the uncertainty that time and distance had created. The anguish of the possibility of meeting her sister, who might no longer be alive, tormented her. The lawyer, understanding the urgency and importance of her wish, mobilized resources to speed up the process. The detective, adept at unraveling the intertwined paths of life, delved into the limited clues that time had left. Every day without news of her sister was a drop of anxiety in Ms. Bernardine's heart. Memories of simpler times, of laughter shared and secrets whispered on starry nights, fueled the hope of meeting Lucy again. Ms. Bernardine, despite a life full of changes, kept her family's values at the heart of her journey. The search for Lucy was not just about shared blood, but about reconciling a story that life had cruelly fragmented. While the detective followed the trails of the past, Ms. Bernardine anxiously awaited every update. Each call from the lawyer was met with a mixture of anticipation and fear. Time, which had once passed slowly, now seemed to slip out of Ms. Bernardine's hands, as if the urgency of her search could alter the course of events. His voice on the other end of the line was a mixture of seriousness and suspense, creating a knot of apprehension in Ms. Bernardine's stomach.
Good afternoon, Ms. Bernardine. I have some important news to tell you. Could you sit down, please?
Suggested the lawyer, creating a suspense that made Ms. Bernardine's heart race. The seconds of silence that followed were almost unbearable. a weight that seemed eternal. With a restrained sigh, the lawyer finally shared the news, choosing each word carefully so as not to dilute the impact.
"We have found your sister."
Were the words that echoed on the other end of the line. Ms. Bernardine, although prepared for the unexpected, felt her legs go weak for a moment. Her mind, immersed in the expectation of news about her lost sister, immediately turned to the worst possible scenario. Her eyes, expressing a mixture of fear and hope, asked the lawyer about Lucy's whereabouts. The answer came as a whirlwind of emotions.
"Lucy is alive, but her health is very poor. She's in a hospital in another state. Unfortunately, her days are numbered, Miss Bernardine,"
revealed the lawyer as the news unfolded before Ms. Bernardine's watchful eyes. Surprise, joy, and sadness mingled on her heart, as if the news had taken her through a roller coaster of emotions. Ms. Bernardine, with a trembling voice, thanked the heavens for finding Lucy, but immediate concern for her sister's condition was evident in her eyes. The lawyer gave details of Lucy's exact location, the steps already taken to make the visit possible, and the need for Ms. Bernardine to get there as soon as possible. The meeting between sisters was a reunion that had been awaited for decades, a union of souls that life had separated and now united again. The hospital, with its cold corridors, witnessed the reunion of two sisters who had been lost in the pages of time. As she entered the room, Ms. Bernardine held her breath for a moment, taking in every detail of Lucy's aged face. The wrinkles were maps of stories lived. The eyes, despite their tiredness, carried a spark of recognition that surpassed time. The sisters' hearts beat in the same rhythm, reaffirming the blood ties that time had not been able to erase.
Oh my God, Lucy!
Murmured Ms. Bernardine, tears welling up in her eyes. Lucy, for her part, smiled with a mixture of emotions, welcoming her sister back into her life.
"I knew you'd come. I was waiting for you. My heart always knew that our reunion was near."
Lucy's words fell like soft petals. Ms. Bernardine, still shaken by emotion, held her sister's hand, as if she could at that moment unite the years of separation in a single embrace. The conversation between the sisters, full of shared memories and tears of longing, echoed in the hospital room. Lucy, even in her fragile condition, shared her experiences, confessing that waiting for her sister was what kept her going in the midst of life's struggles.
"Now I can rest in peace. Fate brought us together again before our final goodbye."
Ms. Bernardine, struggling to hold back tears, offered words of comfort and promises of support. She was willing to use all available resources to provide comfort and care for her weakened sister. However, Lucy, with a wisdom that only time can provide, recognized that what was to come was inevitable. Days after the reunion, life bore witness to the sincerity of her final chapter. Lucy, surrounded by her sister's love and gratitude for a reunion that transcended the boundaries of time, left this life in peace. Ms. Bernardine, even overwhelmed by the pain of grief, felt a deep serenity, as if each tear shed was a tribute to the fulfillment of a destiny that life, with its complexity, had finally sealed. The inheritance that came as a turning point in her life served, more than ever, as a vehicle for the fulfillment of a greater purpose. And in the midst of her pain, Ms. Bernardine found the certainty that the reunion with Lucy, even if only briefly, was the true treasure that life had given her. And if you like this story, I'm sure the next video that pops up on your screen will move you too. Don't forget to subscribe, give us a thumbs up, and activate the notification bell so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos. See you in the next heartwarming story.